Well, thanks, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. The cool thing about having this meeting in Sault Ste. Marie is that I get to see lots of old faces, and I don't mean old age, I just mean old as in I used to work with you 20 years ago, so it's kind of a cool thing. Also, welcome to everyone on the phone, and thanks for joining us here today. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a brief outline of what the Invasive Center is working on with respect to forest pests. So feel free to ask questions. And yeah, I'm going to start with this slide. I'm hoping that everyone in this room and on the phone knows about the Invasive Species Center and who we are. If you do not, please set up a meeting with me because we need to chat and have a coffee. In 2011, the Invasive Species Center was formed. It was a strategic initiative of 4 levels of government, so Canadian Forest Service, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the province of Ontario through the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And we were set up to be a unique example of partnership, a Canadian hub for collaboration and knowledge sharing with respect to invasive species. Since that time, in the last 7 years, and a lot in the last 2 years alone, we've had some major impacts working with our partners. So 170 policy impacts, like developing risk assessments to help with the legislative process in Ontario, best management practices, for example. We've welcomed 10,000 people plus to consultations, training, and presentations. And we have a very strong digital presence with about 130,000 website users and 9,000 social media followers. So what we do is to connect a broad array of stakeholders in order to catalyze invasive species management and then communicate policy and science knowledge. So this is just a snapshot of some of the things that we do. So we do policy research and risk assessment, as I mentioned. We do training workshops on a number of species, both terrestrial and aquatic. We develop BMPs on a number of these species and in addition to pathways, so we'll talk about that as well. We do technology transfer, so getting the research and the science out from our partners and distributing to a broader audience. We do some event coordination. We are the Secretariat for an international conference on aquatic invasive species, which I'll mention a bit later. And we provide for our partners a lot of communications and social media support. We have a citizen science program called the Early Detection Rapid Response Network, which we partner with Ontario Invasive Plant Council on. This is where we engage volunteers across the province to take action on invasive species. With that includes outreach and education, and a new sort of consulting service that we have as well as we try to kind of diversify and expand the services that we provide. So we've done a number of consulting services over the last couple of years. And I have to add and more because we just keep growing. We have 15 really talented and brilliant staff here at the center, and we continue to grow the programs that we do. So today I'm going to talk specifically about forest and land health. As I mentioned, we are multi-taxa, so we cover a number of species, but specifically with forests, I'm going to talk about communications training and resource development, analysis and policy review, and insect diagnostics. So first I'm going to talk about the communications part and some of the resources we've developed in the last year or so. So as far as workshops and training, we have specifically focused in on some of the species that are not yet in Ontario, but we're anticipating. So we've partnered with both the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and M&R to deliver 2 oak wilt workshops in the last year or so, which targeted forest health professionals, land managers. Specifically, we started with the Windsor area, being that it's at a high risk for oak wilt. And the demand was really great. So we held a second session in February of this year, and we had forestry staff from municipalities, conservation authorities, First Nations, M&R, NGOs, arborists, And what we did was provide there was some cross-border support provided by Michigan DNR, as well as MSU Extension and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we were able to take out some of those folks to a field trip as well, to Belle Isle, which is where there is some oak wilt present. And we were able to have some expertise from M&R present, as well as other experts on the subject, and talk about, how to identify oak wilt, what land managers could be doing. And this has led to some really concrete action by some municipalities and other areas to develop plans for preparing for this invasive pathogen. The goal of this was basically just to increase the knowledge of oak wilt, explore control and response tactics for potential invasions, and learn about the scientific research that's happening as well. And then discuss how Ontario can prepare for this potential pathogen and opportunities for collaboration and strengthening our network. So this year we're planning more sessions. We're looking into developing an online session as well, and we have also sent one of our staff to be trained in oak wilt certification so that we can potentially provide some of this really specific training to other folks in the province as well. We also developed a fact sheet on oak wilt, which is available in both English and French, and so it's available on our website. Another workshop that we provided was a tour on hemlock woolly adelgid, and so this was through our EDRR network, and we basically collaborated in that network to host a bus tour to take some of the land managers who have, hemlock as one of their species to New York State in April to look at how that species is impacting hemlock in New York State. And so there they were able to take some really hands-on approach to see what's happening there and how their land managers are dealing with the issue, and then take that information back to their area. And you can see they were able to, get some very specific hands-on training while they were there. Again, we've developed a fact sheet for hemlock woolly adelgid, and we are participating in a group that's dealing with this issue in Ontario and beyond. So the French version is underway, but this is also available on our website. Next, I'd like to talk about the Emerald Ash Borer Management Guide. So this is a project that we're doing in partnership with the Canadian Forest Service, as well with support from M&R and BioForest. So we're creating a practical manual which will be targeted at municipal foresters and other stakeholder groups to assist in planning and managing EAB. So the manual will provide the reader with information and recommendations for management during each stage of the infestation, and it talks about communications, detection and monitoring, treatment options, tree removals and replacements, and regulatory compliance. We're very close to publishing this document, so it's much anticipated, but I can tell you that the manual will focus on recommended actions for 5 critical phases of an EAB outbreak, which will be pre-EAB, so those communities that don't have it yet, early detection planning and strategy development for that community, detection, rapid response during the first years, population growth, accelerated population increase and expansion of the infestation, and aggressive management, and then when the infestation collapses, indicators and scaling down that management. Finally, it'll talk about the endemic phase and long-term management of EAB. So we hope that this manual will be a very practical tool for folks who are dealing with this on the ground either right now or will be dealing with it in the future. So our hope is that this will be published by the end of this year. Forest Invasives Canada is our online portal for all information on invasive pests and pathogens and diseases that impact forests in Canada. If you haven't visited this website, I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of great information on here. So we have species profiles for a number of invasive species. Those listed at the bottom are really just a sample. We've expanded that website quite substantially in the last year or so. So each of those species profiles has background information on all of these pests, how to detect them, how to control them and manage them. There's instructional videos, so how to set up a prism trap, for example, and how to ID these species. And then we have an experts corner, which includes discussions on current research or media related to invasive species. As I mentioned, we've expanded this a lot, and in addition to forest invasives, we have included this regulation information through CFIA partnerships. So some of our communications, targeted communications, and I realize this isn't in Ontario, but just to give you an example of some of the campaigns we're doing, with the recent EAB establishment in Winnipeg, we were able to partner quite quickly with CFIA and get a targeted campaign following that confirmed detection last December. So the goal was to increase knowledge and awareness of EAB in the region, increase recognition and compliance with their established quarantine area, and promote a call to action to limit the spread of EAB. So we developed a new web page on the Forest Invasives website, which was specific to emerald ash borer regulation in Winnipeg, and it gave you the boundaries. It discussed specifics for the regulation in Winnipeg specifically. We hope that this tool will be available with future regulations if needed, that CFIA can use that tool as a communication tool to spread the information. We also integrated some data into EDMAPS. So EDMAPS is the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System platform that's available in some provinces in Canada. So Ontario has a very active EDMAPS program through the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. So we now have integrated all of the national CFI regulated data area into EDMAPS so that when citizen scientists are out with their phones using the EDMAPS app and potentially reporting invasive species, they will know whether or not they're in a regulated area. So that's the yellow area that you see there. And we've also done some targeted social media posts. So for those of you who are not familiar with social media, you can actually have ads that are targeted to certain geographic locations. They're targeted to certain populations, maybe people who are interested in the outdoors or fishermen or hunters, people who are a certain age group. So we've used this tool through Instagram and Facebook and Twitter to target some of the areas we need to target for this information. So this is an example of an Instagram post we did for the Winnipeg area. And you can see we ran that campaign in March. We had a significant number of impressions, almost 110,000 impressions, and over 4,000 interactions as a total of that campaign. And we were able to target that campaign within a 80-kilometer sort of zone surrounding Winnipeg. And we do that for a number of pests. We partner with the province and we partner with CFIA to target a number of pests each year and do those social media campaigns. So you can see here there's a sample. There's EAB. There's spot the difference between Asian longhorn beetle and white spruce beetle. And we target areas like, here's your nice fall picture with your leaves. And that's, talking about the impacts of potential ALB. Hemlock woolly adelgid and oak wilt. We partnered with CFIA and Bioforest on an oak wilt project in Windsor to train some citizen scientists as well to be able to go out and identify. So forest invasives has been very successful. Traffic is up about 44% since in the last year. We've increased our Twitter followers by 50%, and currently Forest Invasive has the most traffic of any of our suite of websites and continuing to grow. So I would encourage you to use that as a tool. So on to analysis and policy review. I'd like to talk about some of the economic impact work we've done in Ontario in partnership with the province. And the goal of this was to quantify municipal expenditures associated with invasive species. We were able to provide a number for the province, the government, and how much they're spending on invasive species management and prevention, but we didn't really have an accurate picture of how municipalities are dealing with it. So we have done a survey, which the results have been accumulated over the last 2 years, and that's been obtained through telephone and online. All 444 Ontario municipalities were contacted by our office. We've received responses from 95. All 36 conservation authorities were also contacted and received responses from 13. We conducted the surveys, accumulated the data, and then the analysis was performed by an economist, Dr. Richard Vine with the University of Guelph. So basically the analysis provides an estimate of invasive species expenses across all Ontario municipalities based on per capita expenses to sort of account for the bias in sample toward higher populated municipalities. But what we've come up with is a total expenditure of $36.4 million per year, province-wide, or about $381,000 per year average per municipality. We think this is also an underestimate, simply because we didn't receive responses from all municipalities, and some things are hard to measure. Some of the in-kind costs and things like that are difficult to track. So this is probably an underestimate, but a significant number as it is. This is a bit of a snapshot from a fact sheet that we did as a result of this study, which is available on our website as well. So it shows you that about 84% of those expenditures are control and management. And, a small percentage is detection and a small percentage is prevention. So it's been shown, and there's folks in this room who have done studies on, prevention versus control and management. And we know that prevention is probably the best bet, but it's the least amount that's being spent. And you can see this chart here kind of gives a list of some of the biggest invasives that are being dealt with. Emerald ash borer in Ontario, the most expensive pest that they're dealing with at the moment. And Phragmites is also an issue that they're dealing with as well. Wanted to mention the Firewood pathway analysis for Canada, which is a project we did with the Forest Pest Working Group of the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers in 2017. So we were tasked with looking at the firewood pathway and calculating the risk. So as everyone knows, many invasive insects have been associated with firewood movement. And firewood is often sourced from poor growing stock, so insects and pathogens have been proven to live in wood for up to 5 years. And moving firewood can transport forest invasive species beyond natural dispersal, and we've seen that. Much of that pathway is unmonitored or unregulated, so that's some of the issues. So the process that we took for firewood pathway analysis is we did the characterization of risk. So we looked at international and domestic movement of firewood and characterized the pathway in Canada, looking at the supplier, vendor, consumer chain. And then we looked at risk mitigation in Canada, the regulatory and phytosanitary measures that are already in place, voluntary actions, and outreach. And that led to a gap analysis and some recommendations. So our recommendations focused around making to address identified gaps for firewood pathway mitigation in Canada, and specifically for outreach, regulatory, and voluntary mitigation practices. And this has led to the formation of the Firewood Movement Working Group in collaboration with the Canadian Council on Invasive Species and other key partners across Canada. looking at implementing some of these recommendations, including best management practices for suppliers, vendors, and consumers, as well as a targeted outreach campaign. More details on that report are available on the CCFM website as well. I also wanted to mention something fairly recent, but the Standing Committee on Natural Resources is undertaking a study of threats and ways of mitigating forest pests across Canada. Their objective was on this study was to draw evidence from experts across the country and how the federal government may improve the processes. It began with a bit of an interest on mountain pine beetle and spruce budworm, but has since expanded with evidence presented from a range of other pests and considerations for urban forests as well. So the ISC was invited to provide our testimony at the House of Commons on October 2nd, which we did. We provided a number of recommendations surrounding working with partners, emergency response, early response, that sort of thing. And the last part is our insect diagnostics program, and Mike mentioned this as well. But this is David, and David is my diagnostician. He is very busy, sequestered in his lab most of the time, one of the most enthusiastic people I've ever seen about bugs. He examines all of the forest health samples that come in from MNRF, as well as those that are submitted through the public portal and EDMAP. We also do get some general public that stop by with bugs, and the CFS as well. And we do this in partnership with CFS and the MNRF. So he looks at insects from all different kinds of taxa that are listed here. And these are some of his results. So you can see that this number of samples have been significantly growing in the last number of years. The blue ones are MNRF submissions from the forest health programs. The red come from EDMAPs, and the green are public submissions. So very busy in our lab here. We're working on expansion as well. David's still calculating some of the results from this year. So these are the results from 2017. But you can see 794 samples, 314 species, and over 31,000 specimens. And I just wanted to mention collaboration and partnerships. We have a number of collaborative groups that we participate in. We have a number of memorandums of understandings for forest pests specifically that have been signed recently. So that allows us to collaborate with our partners across the country to work on the invasive forest pest issue. And next steps, we're looking at increasing more profiles and data integration with forestinvasives.ca. We will be doing more targeted outreach, workshops and education, risk analysis and BMPs, identifying and supporting research focus areas, incorporating more citizen science and outreach in other provinces. And the Firewood group is something we're still going to continue with. We hope to expand our diagnostic services to other provinces as well, and that EAB manual will be out shortly. One other note of interest is EDMAPs. We're looking to broaden EDMAPs into other provinces as well, so stay tuned for that. And I just wanted to encourage you, if you don't already join our network, please do that. We have a really great newsletter that comes out and all of our program updates, and it's free. So go to our website to sign up for that. And a quick shout out to this. I mentioned iCase before. We are the conference secretariat. You might be asking why I'm flagging iCase given it's an aquatic conference. But this year, new to iCase is we're going to have a special session in collaboration with iCase that's going to be chaired by Dr. Taylor Scarr. That's going to talk about terrestrial components and how there could be lessons learned in the sort of crossing over into the terrestrial aquatic realm. So I encourage you to visit our website, icase.org, because the call for abstracts is up right now.